to episode 18 of the Going for Broke Outdoors podcast, a podcast by an outdoorsman for other outdoorsmen. I'm your host, Jeremy Gillespie. In today's episode, we catch up with Ryan Glitsky. I first learned about Ryan through his Instagram, where he goes by Moose1720. Ryan spends a lot of time in the field, and his passion for hunting whitetails is pretty obvious. A self-described rut hunter, Ryan has an impressive collection of whitetails from his home state of Pennsylvania and from his travels across the Midwest, including Ohio and Iowa. In today's podcast, Ryan and I discuss a range of topics, including scrape hunting, trail camera placement, morning, evening, and all-day sits. We also discuss Ryan's experiences hunting different types of terrain in Pennsylvania, including farm country and the big woods. And then we're going to dive into one of Ryan's bread and butter tactics, which is finding subtle funnels with boots on the ground scouting. Really enjoyed my conversation with Ryan, and I definitely picked up a tip or two to put in the toolbox going into next year. Quick note before we get started, Ryan and I actually recorded this podcast back in October. Since then, Ryan took a great buck in his home state of Pennsylvania, so congratulations, Ryan. I actually traveled to Iowa the first week of November and got a nice buck there myself. And then shortly after that, I got COVID and got sick for, almost 10 days. So between traveling and then getting sick, that's why this podcast is delayed. And I'd also like to take a chance now to thank everyone that's been tuning in and listening to these podcasts and sending messages. Really appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com. Visit the Stealth Outdoors store to outfit your mobile hunting setup with some silencing gear. With another November come and gone, hunting seasons are winding down across much of the country. Get a jump start on your gear prep for the 2022 season and outfit your mobile hunting setup with silencing gear from Stealth Outdoors. There's not a better product on the market for eliminating unwanted noise from your mobile hunting setup. Designed from the ground up with a mobile hunter in mind, Stealth Outdoors manufactures climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, and stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Again, visit www.stealthoutdoors.com to place your order today. Now, on to the podcast. All right, on today's show, we're going to welcome Ryan Glitsky. Hey, Ryan, welcome to the show. And before we get started today, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to call and talk whitetail rut tactics with me today. So how are you doing, Ryan?
Good, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, I've been following you on Instagram for a while. I've been enjoying your stories, and it's very clear to anyone that's following you on social media that you're a diehard whitetail hunter. You're out on the weekends all the time, living and breathing it, and that's something I can relate to. Not so much on just strictly whitetails these days since I moved to Montana, but hunting in general. So it's always refreshing when you find somebody with a kindred spirit.
Yeah, it's a I don't even know if you want to call it a passion. It's an addiction.
Sure.
I have to try to keep under control sometimes. My wife will tend to remind me when I'm going overboard, especially this time of year, when the seasons are getting ready to amp up here.
It's definitely easy to get wound up. So Ryan, for my listeners who might not be familiar with you, give us a little background. Start out with like where you lived, how you got involved in hunting, and then I'd be interested, what flipped the switch for you personally from turning from a deer hunter to a trophy deer hunter?
I'm from Southwest Pennsylvania. I started hunting when I was 14, kind of the traditional upbringing, rifle hunting, stuff like that. I started archery hunting when I was 16. I was pretty fortunate enough every year I've hunted, I've at least killed one whitetail. Success came pretty fast and quick for me. But when I started picking that bow up 16, things started to change. I think I killed my first archery buck when I was 19. And then you kind of go through that stage as a hunter. You want to get your first this, first that, and then you start killing. And I kind of went through that for a lot of stages of, I got pretty good at killing deer, does and bucks. And then I think it was like 2005, actually a gentleman I hunted with, he kept telling me, you got to hold out, you got to hold out, you got to hold out, and I think, boy, it was all about just filling your tag at the moment. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And things just started changing for me. And in 2005, I killed like my first buck I put on the wall. It was like, 120 some inch 8-point. And I swear to God, I killed a 160 incher. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I was ecstatic. It was like, it could have been, I didn't even know how big it was. I just knew it was big at the time, and that kind of lit my fire. And, I still killed, smaller bucks, stuff like that for a couple of years. And then over probably the last decade, it has just been balls to the wall, just killing, I want to kill something for the wall. You could say, you know what I mean? I killed those for meat in the freezer, for the venison and all that. But man, when it comes to the buck, I'm pretty much looking for something to put on the wall now. That's just kind of my passion, my obsession now.
Yeah, a few things there. So I've talked to a lot of guys on the podcast and outside the podcast. I'm a pretty active member on the Hunting Beast. And one of the consistent things, and I'm going to point this out for people that are maybe listening to podcasts to get to be more proficient hunters, or they're trying to become, people that are targeting more larger animals or mature bucks, is consistent theme with all these guys is just start out killing deer, right? Kill some does, kill bucks. And, I always say the time to learn when to draw on a deer is not when the booner's walking in.
Yeah, you have to be comfortable in the situation. You have to learn that. And that comes through years of trial and error. We all have misses and hits and stuff like that, but you got to get some kills under your belt to get that confidence there. End of the day, I'm big on confidence kills, and you get that through years of practicing this,
Sure. My other favorite saying is there's no replacement for experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So going back to kind of that transition, you said 2005, you shot your first big buck, and then was it like a personal challenge, or what motivates you to target these older age class deer?
Now it's just a personal, this whole social media stuff, it's fun. I've really got to connect with a lot of fantastic people and some of the best whitetail hunters in the country. But at the end of the day, I don't do it for the likes or follows. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I do it for my own personal goal. There is just something about, the two big passions I have to this is, the number one thing, there is nothing like walking up to a good buck. Once you put all that time and effort in, there's nothing like it. And the second thing, I'm big on my postseason scouting. The process in general, I love the process leading up to that point of, walking up on that big buck. That's what it's all about for me. Those two things there, that's what it's all about for me and why I do and what drives me.
Yeah, that's something else that I've noticed consistently across all these guys that are consistent, successful killers, is that almost all of them, I'd say maybe all of them, really enjoy the process of scouting and putting the whole piece of all the pieces of puzzle together.
That's my favorite. Yep. The postseason scouting, I've actually our season starts here on Saturday, and I can't wait to get in the tree. Hope I'm blessed to harvest a good buck this year, but I can't wait for the postseason because I got some good friends lined up in a couple other states. I'm fired up to do that.
Yeah.
It's that chess match, man. I love it. I'd live for that.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I've been asking all my guests, and this is primarily for the benefit of the listeners, and it's a question that tends to make a lot of guests a little uncomfortable because most of the guys that are hunting are super humble and, not arrogant. But I want to ask, again, for the sake of listeners, at this point, how old are you and how many big mature bucks have you killed now?
I'm 44. Big mature bucks. That's an interesting question. Like you said, you try to stay humble. I think a lot of that dictates the region you come from also, I guess you want to know my resume. I'm actually in my game room now. I have, 15 whitetails on the wall mounted, and I probably got a handful, half a dozen European mounts. I probably on the wall, I got my smallest is a 105-inch 5-year-old killed in PA, and the biggest is a 160-inch killed in Iowa that I killed last year. And I got pretty much everything in between there out of those bucks,
Yeah, and I've seen pictures of the room, and that's why I was asking, because I know you got a pile of good bucks. And like I said, that's for the benefit of the listeners that people aren't familiar with, why should I be listening to this guy, right? But if you haven't seen the pictures, check out Ryan's social media. He's got a lot of great bucks. And like I said, obviously from what I've seen, you're just a hardworking, humble guy. So it's kind of an awkward question to answer sometimes, but thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so before we get into the nuts and bolts of your specific tactics, set the stage for us. Are you hunting generally a specific deer, or are you hunting a certain caliber, age class of deer rather than 1, 2, or 3 specific deer?
I am hunting for opportunity. Probably, I would say, depending on what region I'm in. In PA, I can't really outreach my boundaries and what, I'd love to kill 150, 16-inch deer every year. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But in PA, what I look for on public land, this is probably going to change over the next year or two, but right now my base for PA is like a 3.5, 120 class buck, 8-point or something like that. That's a pretty solid baseline buck for me. I could see that in the years here I've transitioned to the mountain big woods, there's a little better quality bucks, that changing. But when I'm in the Midwest, Ohio, Illinois, Iowa, wherever I'm at, that's more, my bar starts to rise a little more to more the 4.5, 130, 140 class. That's kind of what I'm looking at in those areas, And then when I go, like you say somewhere like Iowa, when I go to Iowa, if I draw my tag, I'm 150 plus. That's what I'm looking for there.
Yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind, right? Because the region should dictate.
Yes. Yes.
I always say I want to shoot a top 10 or 15% buck for the area.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Sounds like we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're a self-described rut hunter, and that's primarily what our conversation today is going to focus on. I'd like to start out with a real high-level question, and this is for you personally. During the rut, do you prefer mornings or evenings, and what's your preference and why?
Well, I've probably killed close to equal amounts between the two, mornings and evening. So, which one I kill more bucks, either or. I would prefer the mornings. I think it's just a personal thing, watching that sunrise and everything, wake up in the morning. There's just something about morning hunts, and the nice thing is too, if you do kill in the morning, you got all damn day to take care of it.
Sure.
It makes it a plus, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But I've killed them equally both. Like I said, I'm an all day hunter, all the time pretty much when it comes to rut, but like I said, if I had a choice to kill one, it's going to be in the morning. I prefer the morning. Just something a little more special about those mornings.
Yeah, I like the morning hunting too, especially during the rut. And I hunt mostly evenings, almost exclusively up until about October 27th, 28th. And then that's when I really start hammering on the mornings.
Yep. Actually, that's pretty much the same to me. I'm typically that first week archer here. I'm hunting, and you may see me in maybe the first day just to be up a tree in the morning. But typically I'm just evening hunting also, up until about that last week, the 24th, 25th, depending on the weather. That's when I'll start my morning hunts pretty much.
Okay. And then you also do a lot of all day sits during the rut. So I'd like to ask a few questions surrounding that. First would be, discuss your observations during the rut for midday movement and any factors that you think might enhance or diminish midday movement. Because a lot of guys aren't sitting all day. And I think some of the guys that are, especially during certain times, are having pretty good luck.
Yeah, how I tackle my all day sits is this. I'm fortunate enough, I get a lot of vacation time. So I'm basically off for a month. So usually last week of October, say around the 24th, 25th is when I start my vacation. And I'll start hunting mornings and, of course, evenings. But what I do is usually I'm prepared to sit all day. When it comes into October, I got a lunch with me, I'm prepared because I've seen those come and heat that last week of October early. And when them does pop early, you see some great action. You see some big bucks. When it comes to the midday stuff, that's typically where I see some of the biggest bucks. Middle of the day. Personally, I kill most of my bucks morning and evening. I've had some success, at middays, that 10 to 2 period. I've had some success, like right on the beginning part of that, the end part of that. That true, like 11, 12 o'clock. I've never erred one right then and there. I've come damn close on some big ones. Last year, I come real close, killing a real big one publicly in PA. But that's typically when I see some just giants middle of the day, just up and cruising. That's, to me personally, that's one of the best times of day to hunt that a lot of guys miss out during a rut. I think a big mistake a lot of guys do is you got to put that ass time in, especially that time of year, because it can happen at any time. I've seen it. Like I said, I see a ton. They could be dead in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock, and then all hell breaks loose. From 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock, it's crazy. It's unreal what I see sometimes midday.
Yeah, and one of the guests that I had on previously, and you might be familiar with the PSU Deer Blog since you're from PA.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, so I had Dwayne Diefenbach. He's the lead biologist or researcher that writes a lot of the Deer Blog entries. And one of the things that I found that was real interesting from their GPS collar study was during the rut, obviously bucks are moving almost all day, but the one slow time was like 4 to 5 a.m., and the theory there is that the bucks bed down. That's a little bit of time that they rest on a regular day. And then a lot of times, I think the reason you're seeing that 9, 10, 11, noon, 1 movement is because they're getting up from bed, and then they're obviously going doe bedding area to doe bedding area. Yeah.
When I'm hunting a rut, I guess you can say is I don't worry about what time it is. When that time of year comes rolling around, weather dependent, like you were saying, things that factor into movement. Like last year, we had a horrible rut. It was 70, 80 degrees some days, for 9, 10 days straight here. and it shut it down. It was the worst rut I've ever hunted, in 30 years or wherever I've been hunting. I've never seen it like that. That will suppress it quicker than shit, in my opinion, the weather. You get those, extremely high, above average temperatures, it just shuts shit down. For me, it was a struggle last year when it was like that.
Yeah, we just experienced that here in Montana with the elk rut. We had a lot of 80-degree days, and so I'd be driving around at night, like night bugling, trying to locate elk. And boy, I tell you what, at night they're doing a lot of stuff, but during the day, the daytime movement, which obviously is when you can hunt, it was very suppressed. So a guy that would be considering an all-day hunt, are there any specific dates in November that you'd suggest? For example, I'm asking you, if you could only sit 3 all-day sits a year, if I put that restriction on you, what days would you pick and why? Or what factors would you look at?
Well, it depends on where I'm at. Now, if I was in Iowa, I've been there 3 times in Iowa. If you give me 3 days, I'm going to take Halloween, November 1st, and November 2nd. I've killed 2 out of 3 bucks I've killed there in that time frame, and I've seen some outstanding action. If I'm in PA, 3 days, I'm probably going to pick probably the 7th, 8th, and 9th. I've done pretty good. I've killed a lot of bucks in around that time frame. Here, I've seen a lot of all-day movement. Those are 3 days I'd pick here in this area.
Yeah, that's pretty consistent what I've seen in Michigan too. My favorite day personally is November 7th. I've killed 2 of my biggest 3 bucks on November 7th. So kind of partial really to that one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Guys, I want to take a quick break from the podcast to talk to you about BackwoodsMobileGear.com. Backwoods Mobile Gear produces an array of products to completely customize your mobile hunting setup. Backwoods Mobile Gear's product line includes climbing aiders like their multi-step aider and Versa aider. Climb higher using the same amount of climbing sticks with climbing aiders at a fraction of the weight of an additional climbing stick. Backwoods Mobile Gear also offers a variety of AM steel rope solutions, from daisy chains for climbing sticks to AM steel gear hangers. Replace those bulky straps and hunt-ruining metal cam buckles with buckleless and lightweight AM steel products from Backwoods Mobile Gear. Check out Backwoods Mobile Gear at www.backwoodsmobilegear.com if you want your setup to be lighter, to take you higher, and to keep your gear tighter. Now back to the podcast. So I've listened to some of your other podcasts and that you've done with other channels, and one of the things that I thought was real interesting and I could relate to was, you said one of your keys to success is finding subtle funnels using boots on the ground, and these are funnels that you can't see on aerials. So describe some examples of those type of funnels, what you mean by a subtle funnel, and maybe share a story about how you found one of those and maybe killed the buck there.
Yeah, I think that's a big key in my success. I think you see, we all can pick out an inside corner. We can all pick out a saddle. And 9 times out of 10, depending on the area, I can bet there's a tree standing there. And personally, I think them big bucks learn that. Not saying they're not going to go through those areas, but I think they learn that. And what tactic I use is, in the postseason, I put a lot of miles in to find these spots. And a couple areas that pop in my head. I actually, a spot that I said I almost killed a buck last year in PA. It's basically on top of a ridge. It's most like a big plateau on top of this ridge. It was a little bit of topography there, but there was an old dry creek bed that ran through this area right off of a clear cut. And there was one low spot in that creek bed where they pinched everything down. Not that dry creek bed, you would never see that on an aerial map or topo or anything. But there was enough of it. It was deep enough cut in the timber, in the land there, to where that one section they funnel across, and they'd stay away from the other real steep areas of it, but they funneled there, and there was a big primary scrape there. And then just north of that, there was a couple other ditches that came up and pinched everything down. Everything kind of just forced that area, almost like a hub of a wheel, and everything just pinched down to the middle of it. There was a couple cuts there. There was a drainage there. Also on the southern end of that, there was a drainage. Like, everything kind of pinched down there. And none of that was showed up on the aerial map. And that's kind of stuff there that I'll find. One of my best spots in PA, actually, you almost got to zoom out like on Google Earth to really understand it. There's a big ridge that's on private property. It's real thick and nasty. It'd be on the eastern side, okay? And then on the western side is a real rugged, real nasty creek bottom. And this is basically, we call it the flat, lays in between these two. But what's right off his flat is a real steep cliff, like a 50, 60-foot cliff that runs probably about 100, 150 yards. But on each side of that cliff, there's two draws. So basically, everything just like a big X just crisscrosses right on that flat right there. There's a couple big primary scrapes. And you'll sit there and ride just all day cruising. But like, if you don't, like, you walk by, there's literally a tran road that runs by, or a logging road. There's people walk by me, you know, when I'm in my stand, literally, you know, small game hunters. Nobody, like, you can't see it physically until you zoom out in your head, you know, and visualize how that area all comes together there. You know what I mean? That's not like a small little funnel, like a ditch crossing or creek crossing. That's kind of on a bigger scale. You know, but you get the same kind of effect, you know what I mean? The same kind of activity through there. That's one of my favorite spots. I've actually killed probably 3 or 4 really good bucks in PA out of one tree. It's just a dynamite location for all day travel. You know, like I said, there's situations where, in certain Midwest, I can get away with hunting a saddle, an inside corner, certain places. But when you get into the pressure states, I don't see the big bucks using those typical funnels as much. You know, they do, you see it, but a lot of times what I look for is I'm looking for multiple things coming together to give me multiple opportunities. You know what I mean? Multiple, like, you know, coming off a clear cut, an edge of transition, you know, there's a creek crossing along with something else. Maybe there's a saddle 100 yards down the ridge, but a lot of things are coming together to make that spot good.
So you're talking about like multiple features that themselves would be pretty good, but when you find all those, like a confluence in one area, sure.
Yes, that's a lot of times. Now, like I said, you got to look at the big picture of that sometimes. Sometimes it's not really on a micro level where you're like, oh, shit, there's a creek crossing. You know what I mean? Sometimes maybe that creek crossing ties into a saddle or something else or along a ridge or a deep cut on the ridge. That all kind of ties in to make a spot really good. There's multiple travel patterns coming together. That's the stuff I'm looking for all the time.
So let's go back to the area you talked about, the flat plateau with the crisscrossing. So it sounds like you found that area during postseason scouting, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Many years ago.
Okay. So let's say you find an area of interest like that. What's your approach going forward? Are you going to throw a sit at that? Are you going to throw a camera at it first? How are you going to evaluate whether your suspicions during postseason scouting are correct or not?
Typically what I do is I find these spots in the postseason. You know, it's kind of, I don't know if just from doing it so long, you know, you kind of get that woodsmanship skilled honed. You know, the sixth sense, the spidey sense starts screaming. You know, you get in these areas and just something's telling me this is the spot. And typically what I do is when I find that spot, I try to break it down, looking at, you know, the thermals, the wind directions, you know, what I see is going on here. Why? You know, asking myself, why is this area look so good? And once I kind of break that down a little bit, that's usually, a lot of times, like I said, I'm big on scrapes, on community scrape stuff. A lot of my good areas are going to have scrapes in them, or I'm going to put a mock scrape. And like I said, that's where the cameras come into play then. And that's what I'll do is I'll start putting cameras on in the summertime, and I'll either let them soak all the way through a season, or I'll check them a couple times. And if I'm getting quality bucks in that area, I will throw sits at that year. That's kind of how I do it. But I'm kind of trying to build up historic kind of data over a year or two between the cameras and maybe some sits to kind of, you know, hone that spot to where it turns into a killer spot. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Seems like a good time to transition into some of the questions I had about trail cameras, because I know that you're running trail cameras pretty regularly, and one of your focal areas for deploying those cameras is over scrapes. So, and you just touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to ask a question because it's got a few parts. Are you deploying your cameras mostly for inventory, or for in-season intel, or for the following year, like you said, historical data going forward? And that's what I would call prospecting.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Okay.
I run about 30 cameras.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I run about 30 cams, and I need more. I cover a big area, so I need more. But anyway, typically what I do is like my summer cameras, that's going to be, I'm putting in a lot of these areas. 90% of my cameras are on big scrapes. Typically, they're on a big primary scrape, especially ones I plan on checking throughout the summer, maybe once or twice into the fall. That's kind of gauge. That's going to give me an idea of the quality of bucks in there. Now, I'll have some cameras that are maybe on like a scrape line. Say that scrape line is running north to south on a ridge or something, I find. A lot of times what I do in my postseason scouting, I'll mark, say, 7 or 8, 9 scrapes in a row across that ridge. Then what I'll do is I come back in when I hang my cameras in the summer. I say I'll put one on the southern end on one of the best scrapes, and I'll put one on the northern end on one of the scrapes I feel is getting hit the most. And then I'll gain that data. I'll let that camera soak through the season. Then when I pull that card, seeing those two cameras, I'll see what them bucks are doing running that scrape line. How, when, all that stuff with wind condition, thermals, you learn a ton doing that, running cameras like that. And when it comes to the in-season stuff, it's kind of all plays in together, I guess. I'm still going to check cameras. If I'm near a camera, I'm not going to go on my way so much when the season comes in because I'm just pretty much I'm hunting, you know what I mean, and bouncing around. But if I come across a camera, maybe a Sunday, if we're not hunting here in PA, I'll go check 3 or 4 cameras and kind of get an idea what the action's going on. Then that's when I'll use that into my game plan for when I'm hunting in the now,
Sure. Something I want to touch on that you just mentioned is you said looking back at the wind, the weather. So are you, when you pull in these cards, are you cross-referencing that to historical data? Do you have some sort of log that you're tracking certain spots, or how are you keeping track of all that information?
I am not, a lot of times I'm not probably as good as I should be with it. You know what I mean? A lot of times I'm looking for date, and I'll look at maybe particular weather in around that area, precipitation or something like that. Why did I have 2 or 3 shooters come in this 2-day period? You know what I mean?
Yep. Then
I'll go back and I'll check, okay, the rain front just came through, or cold front. And then I'll log that stuff for historical data, because that historical data is huge. That is something I've learned probably in the last 2 years. I'm good friends with the guys from Exodus Trail Camera, and I'm telling them guys know their shit when it comes to this stuff. And one big thing I learned from them guys is this historical data. And I started seeing it firsthand with them guys, and I started seeing it over the last 2 years where, maybe not the exact date that buck hits it, but it'll be damn close. Or you just see bucks in general. Might not be the same buck. Say, you had a big buck November 6th or 7th hitting a spot, and be damned the following year, you'll have another buck moving in that area same time. You know what I mean? That activity level seems to stay consistent year to year around it, as long as the weather condition, you don't get some crazy 80-degree weather like last year. You see a consistent pattern every year around that same time frame in that same area, I've noticed.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's really helped me become more consistent is you start keeping track of that information. And then, like you said, over the years, I got a lot of favorite sayings, but trophy deer hunting, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes, that's for sure. Yes.
You start accumulating these spots, and that doesn't happen in a year or 2 years. It happens over 5, 6, 7 years. Well, maybe you find one great spot a year, or maybe it's even every 2 years. Well, after 10 years, you got 5 or 6 great spots, and then you're rotating through all these really high odds areas. So it sounds like you're taking the similar approach.
Yeah, I'm big on finding the kill tree. I'm a big believer. Once you break down the area, there's 1 or 2 spots, maybe 3 spots, and depending on the acreage, that you can go in and consistently kill a good buck out of. Like I said, I'm looking for opportunity. Maybe down the road someday I'll start hunting a certain buck. You know what I mean? But right now I'm just looking for, a quality deer to put on the wall, more or less. And I'm a big believer. There's 2 or 3 spots out there that you can consistently on a piece of property kill a big buck every year. I've done it. I do it now. I got a spot I go in and I can kill a 3-year-old every year on public land in PA if I choose to. You know what I mean? But I'm just certain areas you're just not going to have the quality of bucks you want. That's why I've kind of expanded to the big woods and stuff. But that's where I'm trying to take the same principle to find those kill spots. What I'm trying to find.
Sure. Let's circle back to trail cameras real quick.
Yep.
Of your 30 cams, are any of those cell cameras?
Yes, I have 4 cell cams. I have.
Okay. Now, I've never owned or never used one, but I know a lot of people out there are, and they're interested. And obviously you're paying attention to the stuff that, the data you're getting out of your cams. And like you said, talking about conversations with the guys from Exodus. So are you employing any different tactics with your cell cams? Are you putting them in like harder to access areas? How are you utilizing those? Do you think that in ways that are benefiting you more?
They go into new areas that I found from the previous year postseason scouting. Last year, perfect example. I bought my first L cam last year. I was in a undisclosed location in Ohio and did a little scouting. I actually found this spot in the summertime. It was just there was a real deep cut to come up this ridge right off, probably maybe 7,500 yards off this saddle, right off a clear cut. And there was a logging road, and there was just a big, huge primary scrape. I'm like, well, hell, you know what I mean? Looks like a pretty good spot for cell cam. I had some service. And I did not hunt down there last year. I didn't get time. I drew my Iowa tag. It was in Iowa and I was in PA, so I didn't have an opportunity to go to Ohio. But what that camera did, it hunted for me. That's exactly what it did. That camera hung from, I think I put it down Labor Day weekend, and I pulled it this past summer. So it was in there for over many months. But in the fall, during the season, I had probably at least a dozen bucks from Pope and Young to 160 inches hit that scrape.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can tell you right now, by looking back at the data, that at least last week of October, I can tell you where I'm going to be in Ohio. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't even need another cell cam there. That's how I look at it. Like, I can take that cell cam. Now it's going to do that same thing somewhere else. I have a couple in PA, some new spots. That's what they're there for. Now, being in PA, if I get a couple big bucks showing up, well, of course I'm going to go and hunt it. But for out of state, they're worth their weight in gold. You can go to a new area, set that cell cam up, let it hunt for you. You know what I mean? If you can't get back to the area, or if you're not really 100% sure, let that camera hunt. It's going to tell you the quality of deer in that area and the time frame to be there to kill them. That's what it's going to tell you.
Yeah, and I think the setup that you had it on specifically where, so I've hunted Southern Ohio a few years, and the top of those steep cuts really, really funnel deer, and having a scrape there, like that's I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Elsinger. He's on the Hunting Beast. He described it to me one time as that's a doorway in the woods that every buck's going to walk through.
Yes, exactly. That's one way. That's a really good way to put it. Yep.
So I think obviously the cell cams have an advantage, but it's really important where you place them and to maximize your coverage, right? And then that sounds like a perfect type of setup to place one.
Yep. Well, like I said, I use them for is just to gauge the activity for a certain time of year and the quality of bucks in the area. That lets me know, you know what, it's a new area. I trust my instincts. Now I've been doing it long enough. I trust myself. It's going to be a good spot usually. But I tell you what, you let that cell cam hang in there, and it gives you a lot of information. That's how, like I said, I've used them. Yeah.
And there's only so many days in the season, right? So you could have spent 3 or 4 days there to find out maybe that was a bust, as opposed to now this year going in, you've got, and you said it earlier, confidence kills, right? Now you got all the confidence in the world going in there.
Yep, exactly.
One last break here to mention huntingbeastgear.com. Co-founded by the big buck serial killer himself, Dan Infalt, Hunting Beast Gear features state-of-the-art manufacturing techniques, the highest quality materials, and innovative designs that have been engineered, field-tested, and refined to perfection by a group of the best mobile hunters on the planet. www.huntingbeastgear.com delivers cutting-edge products including Beast Gear climbing sticks with weight reduction holes designed to deliver incredible durability in a lightweight climbing stick. Beast Gear climbing sticks also feature non-staggered, inline stacking, and double steps, all in a 2.2-pound package, including the fastening strap. And new for the 2021 season, HuntingBeastGear.com has released the game-changing Beast Gear Hang-On Tree Stand. Designed from the ground up to be the ultimate hang-on solution with 4 years of prototyping, testing, and refinement, the Beast Gear stand features a 16-inch wide by 29-inch long platform and comes in at an incredible 6.8 pounds without compromising strength or durability. The Beast Gear stand is finished with a durable anodized coating and features grade 8 hardware, high-quality Delrin washers, beast buttons, and adjustment knobs. For more information or to place your order, head on over to www.huntingbeastgear.com today. Now, back to the podcast. So, scrapes are a big part of your hunting. I've personally never had great luck directly hunting over scrapes, and it's probably because I'm using the wrong timing or the wrong tactics. So, what time frame during the rut have you had the best luck hunting over scrapes? Is it early on? So I'm going to divide it up into 3 parts, and this is kind of arbitrary division here, but let's say October 27th to November 5th, then let's say November 6th to the 18th, and then the 18th and later. Are you focusing on scrapes early, middle, late, or all 3, and why?
Of course, everybody knows you get into that last week of October 20s into Halloween. I think that is your peak time to hunt scrapes. That's probably my favorite time. That's when I get probably majority of my activity. But you do read a lot of people say, the scrapes dry up first week of November. So I don't see that. I still have a lot of activity first week and into the teens of November. Last year, actually, like I said, the buck I almost killed in the big woods in PA was November 12th. He was actually coming into a big primary scrape that I was hunting. He unfortunately ended up winning me. But I've seen activity from October, beginning of October, all the way through November. Our season here is typically out by, they extended it last year, by the 17, 18, 19, now it's pretty much out. So I don't really have much experience past that. Other than trail cam data, in Ohio, I've seen great activity in December on my cameras. I've seen it in January. I've seen it in February. I am big. If it's the right scrape in the right location, you're going to have activity on it all year round. It does not matter what time of year it is. You're going to have activity and bucks hitting it.
So give me some factors for you that would differentiate an average scrape from a great scrape.
It's going to be location based. When I said about the areas I'm looking for when I'm out scouting, boots on the ground, it's pretty much similar to, these overlook funnels or top site or situations. What I'm looking for is multiple things coming together to make that like a big primary scrape. There's probably going to be cover nearby, of course. There's going to be a transition or edge. There is going to be, a certain funnel or multiple funnels, multiple things coming together terrain-wise. That's going to kind of pinch everything down to that certain location. It could be thermal-based, wind-based, of course. There's multiple situations. Like I said, some of it's hard to explain because it comes from experience. You know what I mean? You do it for so long, you see it and it just pops. You kind of start putting everything together. But I would say my best scrapes have multiple things coming together to make that area good. Where, like you said, I think what you just said about that front door, all the bucks before they go in to the end of that room. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's that similar thing. It's like that. It's that local hangout, the local bar. It's that area there. Everything, the does. I get like the thing is sport too. People make sure a big thing to me is I love seeing does. I mean, I want to see does hitting that scrape all the time too. Because guess what? It's time to rut. You know where they're going to be. You know what I mean? You want to see that social aspect. You want to see bucks and does and fawns. I want to see all that. That's what makes a scrape good. That's what makes a scrape killer for a camera setup and for a kill spot.
So talk to me about that a little bit, specifically the doe activity. When you're either on camera hunting, when you've had big bucks come in, what's the doe activity been like around those scrapes?
It's pretty, I see a lot of consistent things as bucks do. They come in, they work the licking branch, you know what I mean? The piston scrape, stuff like that. Like right now is these cooler temperatures. I noticed with my cell cams, every morning, I cut does all day, being on these damn scrapes all day. As it's kind of cool as seeing the cooler weather and transition of the whitetails here going into fall. I've been picking up a lot of does activity on, but as the rut closes in, I still see it. It's a kind of a social community thing you see. They come in, they kind of like, who was here? You know what I mean? Kind of deal, I guess you could say. I see a lot of doe activity on my scrapes, on the good ones. I see a lot of it.
So I purposely set you up there, Ryan. So I had John Eberhard on the podcast a while back, and obviously he's had a lot of success hunting scrapes as well. So I like to get the opinions from different people that have success with similar tactics. And John's opinion is that during the rut, scrapes are at hubs of doe activity. So it was interesting to me that you said you've got a lot of doe activity on your best scrapes. So that jives with what John's saying. And anytime, so here's how I look at hunting. I'm a very odds based, numbers type oriented person. Mm-hmm. So whenever I see multiple people having consistent success with the tactic and the same types of explanations, that's something I put in the top of the memory bank. You know what I mean? Yes,
sir. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So that was interesting. And it's, like I said, it's always exciting to me when I hear people that are having the same kind of success, using the same kind of tactics, drawing the same kind of conclusions. So good to know. Yes. Good to know.
Yep. That's cool.
So moving on, I know you primarily hunt two types of areas, and you're hunting big woods, like mountainous areas, and you're also hunting river bottoms and floodplains. And I don't know, what type of terrain do you hunt in Iowa?
I was just basically your farm country, a little bit of rolling hills type deal. Yeah, I hunt actually Van Buren County. It's would be southeast Iowa, arguably one of the best counties in the world by whitetail.
Sure.
So that's my gift to myself for dealing with all the public land BS.
Well, let's focus on the tougher public lands, PA and Ohio, because I think that's more people can relate to hunting high pressured ground. I'd like you to compare and contrast your tactics in those two terrains. And let's start out first by, what are you doing similar, if anything, from the mountains to the river bottoms?
Similar, boy, I mean, they are two different things. If I would say similar, probably just going to be my basic tactic overall of rut hunting, just planting my ass down somewhere where I feel pretty damn confident hunting. Dark to dark, a couple of days in a row. However I feel, if I feel pretty confident in that spot, I'll hunt a couple of days in a row. I think maybe just the tactic base, I'm going to put my time in either place. But the two are just extremely different when it comes to a lot of things.
Okay. Well, that's my follow-up question is explain how they're different and what are you doing differently in the mountains that you wouldn't be doing in the river bottoms or vice versa?
I would say now the mountainous, the big woods, this will actually be my second year. I've transitioned out of the flood control, hill country, farm country type based stuff there. It's a little bit of mix of everything. The reason being there's a high deer population in that, like kind of the farm country, the flood bombs. It's not a problem to get out there and see deer. You know what I mean? The big thing is the quality though. There's going to be lower deer numbers in your mountainous terrain in the big woods. Way different. But the quality of bucks are better. That's the big reason I moved there. It might be a little harder hunting, but I have a better chance for quality buck.
Right.
And I think, like, when it comes to, like, just say setting up and scouting and all that, it's easy for me to find a good spot in the flood control, the hill country, the farm country. To me, that comes easy. It's easy to set up in, your traditional areas sometimes and stuff like that and see deer and get on deer. The big woods.
Traditional areas, you're talking like stuff you talked about earlier, inside corners, saddles.
Yeah, you can get on deer. You're going to see deer. You may have to still hunt, like you said. I'm still going to look for those overlooked areas to get on the better quality bucks, but it's not as hard to get on deer there. I can be consistent on even good bucks there, 3-4-year-old deer there. You know what I mean? Compared to the mountains. Now, the mountains, what's crazy is I can scout. Say I go out in my winter post and scout. I might put 7, 8, 9 miles on plus in a day. And you're just walking for nothing. You know what I mean? I'll just walk and it's like, and just nothing. This is just no. And then I swear it happens every time about mile 9 or 10 and I'm done for the day. The heavens open. I'm like, oh, here it is. You know what I mean? It just seems like those good spots are just so far between, you're just putting on the miles to find a good spot every time. It's a couple scouting trips till you find that spot or a good camera location or something like that. Just seems like I got to put a lot more time in to find those good areas in the mountains. That's what I've really picked up on.
I think that's something that doesn't get discussed often enough is a lot of times your boots on the ground scouting it turns out to be ruling areas out that are going to be unproductive.
Yes. You're looking for I guess you would say you're looking for that 10%, if that, maybe 5% that's worth hunting, especially in the big woods and mountains. You can pretty much cross 90% of that off plus. It's not saying you can't kill something, it can happen anytime, anywhere. But if you want your odds to be high, you got to find that 5-10% of that area, what that big buck's going to feel comfortable in. That's the key. Typically that's going to be around something you're going to have cover. That's a big key is your cover. And then once you find your cover, you're coming off of that and trying to, put the pieces of the puzzle together to find that spot.
Yeah. So your good areas that you're talking about when you finally do find one in the big woods, have you noticed any common features among those? What are you looking for? What tips you off apart from a scrape that's going to be a good area?
Usually cover. Usually cover's a big thing. I'm usually not far off of some type of maybe like a clear cut or something.
Okay.
Some type of edge typically. It could be mountain laurel thicket. It could be, like I said, a clear cut. A lot of it is based around cover. Steep topography also, and maybe running down to like a river bottom or something like that. Anything that's hard to get into, that's where the big bucks are going to be. They're going to get away from that pressure. And a lot of times that, in around the areas coming off that edge, that transitions where a lot of times you'll pick up your rub, your scrapes and stuff like that. And you can start putting some pieces of the puzzle together there. That's kind of what I'm looking for all the time is once I get in these areas, you start getting that vibe, then I start breaking that area down, trying to find the area I want to be in. And, usually, like I said, scrapes are a big part of my tactic. And when I get these areas, I'm really looking hard for them scrapes, for the right ones, so I can start hanging cameras and marking them locations down for the summer.
So in the big woods, are you finding those low on benches, up high on plateaus, all over the place? Any consistency there?
A little bit of everywhere. You'll find them atop the ridges. You'll find a big scrape line, run across a ridge. You'll find a big primary scrape, maybe in the bottom of a creek bottom where a big thermal hub comes together where all thermals are dropping. Yeah, I find them a little bit of everywhere. Like I said, it could be a couple of terrain features coming together where, boom, it's right there sitting. It's a little bit of everywhere. You'll find them.
Okay. Yeah, I think it gets back to the point you said, too, what a lot of those things probably have in common is hubs of deer activity, not necessarily thermal hub or whatever, but something where a lot of deer are going to be passing through, or a lot of deer relative to that area, I should say.
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to get back to it because I think it's a super important topic. Historical data for either certain bucks or specific areas, and it sounds like you're doing that. Are you, and you said, maybe you're not logging that as good as you should be always, and I'm guilty of that too. I think everybody is to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But are you looking at, let's say, going into this season, do you have certain areas that you're going to target on certain dates? Like you already mentioned Ohio, right?
Yes. Ohio is definitely one of them. I will be down there probably, I'm thinking October 27th, about November 2nd and 3rd. That is my plan to do there. And from my camera data from last year, it's hunting. There's no guarantees.
Oh, sure.
I'm very confident that I'm going to get my eyes on something good. It's a very low deer density area, but I feel that I'm going to get my eyes on a good buck. The kill's another story, but I feel pretty confident that I'm in the game. That's with that. And then when it comes to other areas for historical data, actually, a buck that I thought was dead just showed up on camera for me. And unfortunately, he was pretty active at the same time going to Ohio. But I am going to put a game plan together for him in a rut and see if I get on him. I'm going to go off historic data to try to get an arrow on him also this year.
Nice. So, no, that's interesting because I keep emphasizing this in a bunch of podcasts because I think that's one of the, like I said, one of the things that was kind of a game changer for me personally is realizing that certain areas are only hot certain times. Like I had a really good early season spot in Michigan, and then I had a spot that was only good for like 5 days around Halloween, and it took a long time and a lot of cameras and a lot of wasted sits, to figure that out.
Yep.
But once you do, that's really important. So that's why I keep hammering on the timing thing.
Yeah, the timing is really important, especially in you hear a lot of different things about the rut, and one thing I've noticed, guys well, that buck's here and gone tomorrow. I don't see that. I've seen certain areas. I get a buck move in, he'll be there for a little bit. I'll see him for 5-6 days. Possibly, depending on the doe. Many a times I've seen a buck move in November 2nd, 3rd or something, whatever date is, and I'll get an opportunity in 5 days later in the same area. You know what I mean? So you got to remember all that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I talked about too on a recent podcast I was on, and something that I don't think everybody pays attention to, but more people should pay attention to. And again, I'm kind of a nerd, so the deer biology aspect, right? Learning about the deer and like how long is an estrus cycle? How long is that deer likely to be there? Not that every deer is patternable, but what is in general, what are bucks doing that time of year? They're going to a bedding area until they find an estrus doe, then they're locking down with it. So it's, those things are real important to understand.
Yes, definitely.
Well, let's talk about the evolution, if there is any, of your strategy as the rut progresses. So again, let's back up to October 25th, 27th, starting out the rut, go through maybe, every 3 days or every 5 days. Are you moving to different types of areas? Are you hunting scrapes the whole time? If things aren't panning out, are you adjusting? What's your strategy look like? So let's say from October 28th to November 28th.
What's interesting is mobile hunting is a big thing now. That's a big term. And a lot of that's associated with bed hunting. You get a lot of that around that. And then when you say you're a rut hunter, that's not real sexy. Everybody thinks, he's sitting in the same tree for 20 days straight. No, that's further from the truth. I'm extremely mobile. How I play this game is once it starts getting good in the 20s, I'm moving. I hunt typically. I have a saddle, or I have a Lone Wolf custom gear set, or I have maybe a couple presets up in areas historically I have good, information from. I start bouncing. I'll start moving. I'm checking some cameras here and there, seeing the activity. Once I get an area that rut activity started to amp up, maybe a doe's getting ready to pop, I'm starting to see some mature bucks. That's the area now I'm going to put my time in. Now, it may be one tree for 3, 4, 5 days straight, or it may be 2 or 3 days, or 2 or 3 trees, a day here, 2 days here. I come back here for a day. I'm over here for 3 days, in this general area, to hunt down maybe a couple bucks I have on camera. That's typically how I do it. I have no problem sitting in the same tree for 6 days straight, dark to dark, if I feel confident, you know what I mean? But I have no problem bouncing tree to tree every day also, if that's what it needs to be. I'm gauging the activity. That's what dictates how long and where I'm going to stay.
No, and exactly what you said, I think, is my strategy too, gauging the activity. So if there's a good buck in the area and you're seeing the same doe group every day and your access is clean and you haven't disturbed them, then I don't think there's necessarily a reason to abandon that stand after 1 day either, or even two or three. No. But if you start spooking those does off, well, then you might as well pack up your bags and go to the next one, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of problem guys have is the access. Your entry and exit is extremely important. When I'm breaking down those spots, like I said, you almost start breaking down to micro level with your wind direction, your thermals. You got to break down the entry and exit route. And it may be a bitch. It might take you a mile and a half out of the way. Well, that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do to keep a spot clean. You know what I mean? I've killed many a bucks after multiple sits. Everybody's about that first sit. And I think the first sit is your best sit. Don't get me wrong. But I've killed a lot of bucks on my wall on the third or fourth sit, but that was because of clean access.
Yeah. And I've been all over the map on that. So I started hunting with like the very, very, very basic Michigan hunt over bait pile tactics. And then I got on the hunting beast where I was sitting a different tree every evening and morning. And I've kind of come back to a point where now, like you said, clean access, I think goes back to knowing the deer biology, right? Early season, bucks are concentrated in a small core area. And 1 or 2 sits is probably usually all you get because then they're onto you. They smelled you, they saw you, whatever. But during the rut, when they're covering 2,500 to 5,000 acres on average, over the course of November, well, yeah, that buck might not come through every day. You might only be there every third day. So I think I've tried to adjust my tactics the more I've learned about deer, and that's really helped too.
Yeah, I actually think a big mistake guys make. I hear some guys that don't like hunting a rut. And a lot of times it's the guys that are really, really mobile. They're constantly moving every day. In certain situations, certain areas, you can get away with some of that stuff if you're in Iowa and Illinois on some lower pressured areas and with higher numbers of big bucks. You know what I mean? Yep. You're going to luck into one, or not say luck because it's still a lot of skill involved, but you know what I mean? It's a numbers game.
Yep.
Now when you're in areas of high pressure where it's not a numbers game now, you're kind of chasing that needle in a stack of needles. You know what I mean? I think you're better off sometime to be aggressive, but be patient also with maybe give that spot another day or two. You know what I mean? Maybe you didn't see a whole lot today, but you know what? Because I burned myself last year, actually. It was towards the end of the season, and I was hunting the mountains, and the mountains is a mental game up there. You don't see a lot of deer. And actually I had a big snowstorm come in, and I sat in all day. Didn't see one damn deer, but I told myself I'm sitting in this spot for 3 or 4 days just because everything came together here. Something's going to cruise through here eventually. Well, a snowstorm come in, and whatever reason, I second-guessed myself, and I moved. Well, I checked that camera that I had in that spot a couple of days later, and sure shit, next day if I sat there, it was like 8:30 in the morning, one of my target bucks came through.
Oh, man.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So that's what was a lesson learned. Like, stick to what I know and what I'm confident with. Start bouncing around. Sometimes start chasing your tail a little bit in the rut. That's what ends up burning some guys, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I can relate personal experience in low deer density areas like you're talking about that you don't always see the sign that you'd like to see in a higher deer density area. So it can be real hard to tell, like, is he really in here or is he not? Yeah,
exactly. It's a mental game.
Yeah, especially like you said, there's nothing worse than sitting in an all-day sit and only seeing a couple deer or no bucks.
Yeah, it's a long day.
Yeah, well, and then you're thinking, geez, if I would have been in spot B or C or D, I would have saw all these other bucks.
Yep. You started out thinking yourself exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears. You've got a wife and a kid or kids. How many kids you got? I
was divorced about 5 years ago. So I was married with 2 kids, got divorced. I got remarried and had another little one. So I decided to have another kid when I was 41.
All right.
Yeah. He's a little holy terror.
Yeah.
It keeps me young. I'll tell you that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So having a wife and kids, I think that's something most blue collar guys or typical hunters, public land guys can relate to. And everyone has a hard time making time with all the other obligations in life, right? We got to work, got to pay bills.
Yeah.
And you found a way to be whitetail oriented, what appears to be pretty much throughout the year. So how do you balance your family time and your passion for hunting? And more importantly, what tips would you give guys looking to make the most efficient use of their time?
My life's structured, maybe a little different for some people, I guess. My wife, we're pretty good and open about things. I guess you say my passion, my addiction is whitetails. My hobby is lifting. I've lifted weights for probably over 20 years. It's just been something I've always done to keep physically in shape. And luckily, my wife is big into it. So basically, my week structure is, wife would go to the gym. We switch off with the kid every day. And then come weekends, what's nice is she goes to the gym on the weekends, and I don't go to the gym on the weekends. I go in the woods, and we have somebody watch them. So it works out really good. So pretty much every Saturday, unless there's some family stuff, I'm pretty much in the woods for 4, 6, 8 hours, depending on the time of year. Sometimes Sundays I'll get out there also, depending what's going on. But I guess that's how I structured my life around whitetails. God, my kids come first, and my family, of course. You know what I mean? But then there's whitetails. And but I've just been fortunate enough that me and my wife work really good together. She does her thing, and I get to do my thing. So it works out pretty good.
I know not every couple's got that, but I'm pretty lucky to have the same kind of relationship where my girlfriend's real understanding. And I think having the right partner, if you do have that obsession with hunting, is very critical to the long-term success of the relationship.
Yeah, because it can go the opposite way. Trust, I'll be honest with you. Straight up tell guys, I'm divorced because of whitetails.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, my first marriage, I kind of put myself first to us. I learned a hard lesson. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So this time I learned that, she lets me know when things are getting a lot of hand. She knows it's hunt season. I take a whole month off archery. So I'm pretty fortunate. You know what I mean? She's really cool with that, stuff like that. So we have a really good system here in place. And like I said, she backs me 100% with my passion. I back her.
Yeah. And just from what I've seen of your Instagram, all the work you're putting into whitetails, the work sounds like you're putting in the gym. I'm sure in the off season, you're putting extra work into the relationship too, right? Like that's important.
Oh yeah. Yep, definitely. Yep. She said, let's go do this. Okay. Right. I don't order. She wants to do that. I said, I don't care. Go ahead. I'll watch him for a weekend. You go to Florida. I'm like, yep, that's fine. I'm good with that. And I'll play Mr. Mom for the weekend. Yeah. I'm good.
Hey, I want to back up. I had one more question kind of related to this, but I skipped one here on accident. So,
okay.
So something that doesn't get talked about a lot either, I think, when it comes to podcast is actually shooting the deer. Your thought process, how you practice with your bow, what has helped you over time, right? Because I don't know. I think everybody, at least initially, suffers from some degree of buck fever or anxiety or excitement. So what have you learned over the years, and what's your shot process like now, and what helps you stay in the zone and, get the arrow where it's got to go in the deer?
This comes back to what at the beginning we said, you got to kill those small bucks. I don't care. I don't care if you're out shooting groundhogs. Get that experience of a little bit of adrenaline, under you. Get a little bit of that fever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Get in the moment. You need that. And that comes from killing. That's a big thing. You got to get get a few kills under your belt. But the process of me, I'm not a big technical archery guy. My bow is 16 years old. So that tells you.
Sure.
That old girl's been going, but she's killed a lot, and I'm very confident with it. It's simple, and that's fine by me. When a big buck's coming in, I'm pretty confident he's going to die. I mean, we all make mistakes. You know what I mean? I still make mistakes to this day. But personally, once I see that target animal, either the bind is wrong or I see my eyes, once I know it's a shooter, I go in a different gear. I don't really get super worked up. We all get that kind of tunnel vision or whatever.
Yep.
But I don't get super worked up till after the shot. Basically, once I know the target, I don't know if it's an 8-point, 10-point. I have no clue. I don't, you know what I mean? Once I know it's a target animal. And basically, what I tell myself when I come in, I draw my bow. I have a saying, I guess you could, in my head. I tell myself, wait a second, pick a spot. I always tell myself, I said, wait a second, pick a spot. It just gives me that fraction of a second to settle that pin in. You know what I mean? I tell myself, wait, pick a spot. I always tell myself that because how it is, you get worked up. As soon as that pin hits that hair, and it's typically high, and that's the worst place you can hit a whitetail, is hit them high.
Yeah.
And that's typically what I've learned is just say something in your head, just that millisecond to get that pin settled in. and then go ahead and follow through. Then that's typically me. That's when I get worked up. So
sure. It's funny that two of the things for sure you said. So obviously, as an archer, I've made mistakes in the past too, and one of my biggest mistakes, and it's cost me 2 of the 3 or maybe 4 deer that I've lost over my archery career, is follow through. So my process now, I say 3 things. As soon as I see something I want to shoot, I remind myself to breathe, because it's like easy to let your heart rate get out of control. So I try to focus on my breathing. The second thing I always say is aim. You talked about that. Take a second. You almost always have more time than you think. Almost always.
You do.
In the moment, the time goes by so fast. And the last thing I always say is follow through. Try to hold that pin all the way through to the deer's running off, because peeking around the bow has cost me $2 for sure. Yeah. Yep.
It's happened to all of us.
Yeah. And as embarrassing as it is, 2 of the 3 deer that I've lost, or like I said, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but they've been on shots inside of 15 yards, and it's because it's like, it's a slam dunk. Like I said, pin on hide or jerking the bow, looking at So those things are real critical as you progress, I think, is to have, and whatever it is, right? Whatever works for you, have some sort of system or routine you go through, and when that deer's coming in, so you keep your mind right.
Yeah, make it a habit. And when you're out there shooting your bow, that's like, I cold shot pretty much every night. I only shoot 3 arrows a night. That's all I ever do usually.
Okay.
Because I'm sitting for an hour to 10 hours till I get an opportunity, in a day. And pretty much how I do it in the summer is I go out, shoot 3 arrows. That's all I shoot. That's all I've always done. That's just how that works for me. I'm stiff. I'm not loosened up, but that's how I practice. That's how I always done it. And it works for me.
Yep. Something to be said for that too. Practice how you hunt.
Yeah.
So we went back to that, but we were talking about family life and balance. And the other thing that I've noticed is you seem to be a real positive, motivated guy. So let's talk about maintaining a positive attitude when things aren't going your way, because that certainly happens in the whitetail woods. So
that's every year.
Yeah. So let's talk about maybe 15 days into your month off and things haven't went your exact way. How are you finding the motivation to get up and, when the alarm goes off at 3 a.m. to get out there and hammer on it again?
Mentally wise, it's very draining, all of this. It will be as the season progresses. Physical wise, it beats your ass. I do believe being in physically some decent shape helps the mental side of it. You know what I mean? It makes it a little easier getting up in the morning, makes it a little easier getting in the stand, to and from. I think that's the really important part, watching your diet. All of that all plays into the mental part of it. But when you're grinding, trust me, I said on another podcast, there's some mornings I'm driving in, me and Jesus are having some talks, because it's like, Lord, can this be the day, please? You know what I mean? It's tough. And I think I've been preparing myself for weeks now leading up to our season, telling myself, I know what it feels like. I know what it's going to be. I know the grind, but this is my love. This is my passion. It's going to suck the majority of the time, but when that opportunity comes, I want to be prepared mentally wise for it. And then I know that feeling once it all comes together, that rush, that's the high that we can only get when we walk up to them. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That's what drives me. That high, I cannot get anywhere else. I cannot get that walking up on a big buck. That adrenaline rush, like, you can hear me 3 miles away. I get so fired up when I kill one. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it all finally, it's the weight's off your shoulders, because like I said, I don't give a shit anybody else. Like, if I eat my tag this year, that's my problem. That's my business. That was my choice, because I'll get opportunities to bucks. Just the buck I want, am I going to get that opportunity? I do this for myself, but that high, that's just, that rush of walking up on a big buck, it is so addicting. That is what drives me all year to do.
Yeah. And I think there's something, just humans in general, about setting really challenging goals and achieving them. Like, you get the kind of satisfaction that you can't get from a lot of other activities. You don't get that watching Netflix or doing whatever else.
No.
Yeah. Well, hey, Ryan, we're coming up on an hour here. Really appreciate you coming on the show today. I want to give you a chance to turn it over to you if there's anything else that you'd like to add, or experiences that you've had over, like you said, your last decade of being really hardcore into archery and whitetail hunting that you think would be good for the listeners to know.
You know what? Season's coming. Get ready to grind. If this is your passion, put everything into it. Put 110% into it. Before we know it, there's going to be 6, 7, 8 inches of snow out there, and it's going to be over, and we got to start all over again. So if you're the next, 2 months, 3 months, put everything into it. It's a short time. We're only here a short time. This means everything. Just do it. Put everything into it.
Yeah, only so many opening days, only so many deer seasons. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit younger than you, 38, but man, every year it's like you can see the sands going through the hourglass.
Yeah, tell me, once you get in your 40s, you're like, well, shit.
Right. Well, just around the corner for me, so I hear you.
Yeah. Yep.
So Ryan, we talked about your social media a little bit. If you want to share that, where can people follow along and check your adventures out?
You can get a hold of me on Insta. I'm under Moose1720. I pretty well stay pretty active on there, especially my stories. Every time I'm out in the woods, you'll see me BSing about something. Yeah,
I've really enjoyed following along. And like I said, that's where I found out about you at first. And the older I get, the more I've been trying to surround myself with, positive people that are getting after it.
Yep.
And saw that in you and your stories. So I've been enjoying that, and like to wish you good luck this fall.
Yep. Good luck to you also.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks again. And I'll be following along. And if you knock down a good one or two, we'll try to catch up after the season. How's that sound?
Awesome, man. I look forward to it.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks again, and take care.
You too.